We will be recording the webinar today, so you can request a recording. So a little bit of housekeeping. We are going to have a presentation, and then we will have time for questions. I would suggest that you put your questions in the question box that is provided in the webinar panel itself. There is an option for raising your hand, but it is better simply to type your questions in. Also, at the end of the webinar, we will be giving away the Amazon gift card, as we had mentioned in the invitation. Just so you know, we will send that gift card to the email that you put in for this webinar, so change it if you need that to be changed. A little bit about HarePoint. HarePoint is a unit of MAPILab. MAPILab started out about 10 years ago making add-ons for Outlook and Microsoft Exchange, and now for 8 years, HarePoint, as a different division, has produced products exclusively for SharePoint. This started in 2008 with the HarePoint Analytics solution, and we have grown the line of products up to 16. The software has benefited from continuous customer feedback, and this has been especially true of the product that is kind of the basis for this webinar, the HarePoint Workflow extensions. That has oftentimes had additional activities created specifically by customer request. So let's go ahead and turn this over to Bob Mixon of Collective Knowledge Solutions. Bob is.
Sure. Can you hear me, Steve?
Yes, I can hear you. Thank you for this, Bob, and let's have you take the floor.
Absolutely, I appreciate it. Can you see my screen okay?
Yes, your screen is fine.
Oh,
if anybody can't see, if anyone can't see the screen, great. Please let us know.
Yeah, please let us know if you can't see the screen. A little bit about my company and myself. Collective Knowledge Solutions has been in business for about 6 years now. We're a leading provider of SharePoint consulting services. We do partner with a very limited number of vendors, such as HarePoint. We keep that to a very small amount of vendors, as we really feel like we pick the top quality products that are in the market. There's so many of them that are available. And certainly HarePoint's workflow extensions that I'll be showing you today are what I would consider at the top of their game. They're absolutely fantastic tools. So we work with HarePoint to sell their products, but also provide the integration services. So if you need help with the implementation of automating business processes or your SharePoint solution, then certainly give us a call or come to our website and contact us. A little bit about me. I'm a 5-year Microsoft SharePoint MVP. I was one of the first MVPs for SharePoint back in 2006. Myself and the company, we've implemented more than 100 enterprise-class document management, knowledge management, and records management solutions. Many records management solutions in the last few years with a new release of SharePoint 2013 coming out. But we specialize in information architecture, library sciences, design, implementation, and again, the automation of business processes. If you'd like to read more about me or read my blog, you can go to bobmixon.com and send me messages if there's information you need or you'd like to have me write about something. I'm more than happy to do that. Let's jump right in today to the HarePoint workflow extensions, which I have been working with. The way I actually got started and introduced last year to HarePoint was I was working with a client of mine, and they really wanted to limit the amount of .NET custom development effort because the costs are, to do so can be astronomical. So I started looking around for some workflow extensions to facilitate the automation of some business processes. And HarePoint was one of them that I evaluated and absolutely loved the product. Their current version has more than 260 activities and conditions, and I'm going to go through. I certainly can't show you all 260 of them, but I'm going to show you the categories, and we'll take a look at what those are. The workflow extensions work seamlessly with SharePoint Designer, Visio, and Visual Studio. It literally took less than 10 minutes for me to install the tools on my servers. Just so you know, they are and have been in the implementation of an Office 365 version of their workflow extensions. That beta will be available this summer, sometime this summer. I haven't gotten any specific dates on it. I'm very excited about that. Many of my clients, at least 60% of my clients are running Office 365 in either a hybrid or a standalone manner, and they'll greatly benefit from these extensions also. So if you were curious about the Office 365, they are coming, and I'm excited to start giving them a try myself. As far as the activities and conditions that are included, these are the major 17 categories of activities, and I'll certainly walk through and show you. In fact, I'll bring up SharePoint Designer and the workflow that I'm going to be demonstrating today to just give you an idea of the extent of conditions and activities that they've included in this package. It's rather alarming. They have a number of Active Directory activities that you can begin to do onboarding and offboarding through automation workflow. So for example, I've used this with an employee onboarding scenario where an HR manager fills out a form. That form goes through a set of approval processes. You can then have HarePoint create Active Directory accounts, set up email accounts for you, and you don't have to write one line of custom code. The other SharePoint administration activities, we're going to use some of those today for site provisioning. They have array activities, and these are much more comprehensive than the dictionary activities that you get out of the box with SharePoint Designer. I'm sure if you've done SharePoint Designer workflow development in the past, their date and time activities are rather limited. It's very difficult to extract to date, this current year, for example. I just had this requirement a month ago where I needed to extract the year out of a date that was entered and work with the months within that year. That was all very comprehensive and easy to do with these tools. There's development activities that allow you to actually execute .NET code, C# code, PowerShell scripts right from your workflows. Document conversion activities, document library. The conversion activities are fantastic. We can built into this set of tools is the ability to, for example, take an info path form, convert it to a PDF, and drop it into a library. Where would you use that? In records management solutions. Since so many people have info path forms, if you've ever tried this, it's virtually impossible to take that info path form file, the XML file, out of a forms library and drop it into a record center. The user interface is completely different. If you go that approach, you have to actually implement the info path form in the template itself in the record center. Most people don't want to do that. So the conversion to be able to convert that form into a PDF file makes it much more comprehensive to a records management solution. Many document library activities for uploading files, copying files, moving files, even across farms. They have the ability in the extensions to move files from one site to another on the same site, across site collection boundaries, across farm boundaries. Very comprehensive email activities with attachments. So if you have a list item that has a document attached to it, you want to send that attachment as part of the email, all those activities are available. Image activities, list activities, network management, office, permission, printing. I'm also going to demonstrate some of these permission activities today in my demonstration. Printing, social activities, which is integration with Yammer and some of the other social tools. comprehensive string activity. I was very pleased to see this, and I'm going to demonstrate some of these also. For example, out of the box SharePoint Designer workflows, there's no way to do a simple string replace. I want to find all spaces in a string and replace those spaces with a hyphen or a dash. That's one activity to do something like that, and I'll show you. And then workflow activities to execute other workflows, wait for those workflows to complete. So there's just a tremendous amount of workflows in here, and I'll show you those categories so you can get an idea of the types of activities that are available. Again, I can't go through all of them. It would take hours and hours. There is on the HarePoint website, while this is loading, I'll go back over here. On the HarePoint website, if you go to their products, HarePoint Workflow extensions, they have a comprehensive set of workflow examples, reviews, and videos on the product. And if you download the product sheet and the documentation, they have very comprehensive documentation about every activity, every condition, and what the parameters are for those conditions. I literally had it up and running in about 15 minutes in this environment. So let me just put my mouse right here just so I can show you the different conditions that are available. So they're HarePoint activities, Active Directory. You can see add member to Active Directory group, change Active Directory account settings, change local user account settings, all the way to creating mail contact information, setting user attributes in Active Directory, moving user to different organizational units. Again, where I find this to be most useful in a SharePoint environment would be for employee onboarding or vendor onboarding or client onboarding and offboarding processes where you have your project team onboarding clients, for example. You may have HR onboarding employees and offboarding them. Those processes can now be completely automated using SharePoint Designer as the workflow platform, or SharePoint as the workflow platform, and developing it all in SharePoint Designer without having to do any of this in .NET or Visual Studio. They have administration activities to activate features, deactivate features, create sites, create site collections, and so on. Their array management allows you to move arrays around arrays of objects and strings, copy arrays. Again, very, very comprehensive set. Their date time activities, their development activities allows us to execute SQL scripts, query XML and do XML transformations, run PowerShell scripts, run custom code like .NET code, all from your SharePoint Designer workflow. Document conversion, convert an info path form to a PDF and save it in a document library. Just very, very comprehensive. This is their document library activities that includes to check in items, check out items. They also have conditions that allow you to say, is this document checked in? If so, check it out before I do some manipulation of that document, and vice versa. You can then check the item back in. Email. I found these to be very comprehensive. Send email with file attachments, send emails with HTTP file attachments, info path. So you can actually have an info path form, send that as an email, as an attachment to that email. There's, again, just so many different activities we can work with here. This is their list activities, everything from creating site columns to deleting list items, so on and so forth. Sorry about the background noise here. Getting you list URLs, getting workflow task properties, so on and so forth. Uploading files with attachments, very comprehensive. Again, I'm not going to go through all of these, but I wanted to give you an idea of how many extensions are actually included in this package. Permissions management is something I'm going to show you in our demo today, where I provision a new project site, and then based on the manager that has been entered in this info path form, I give that manager contribute rights to that new project site that was just provisioned. Printing, they're social, so you can interact with different social entities out there, including Yammer, Twitter, others. The string functions are very comprehensive, and I use these very common to what you would see in like a .NET language. I'm a C# programmer, for example, so doing things like replace text, split text, trim spaces from the beginning or the ending of strings. You can do all of that in here. And then, of course, their workflow activities allows us to execute or start a workflow, wait for a workflow to complete, so on and so forth. So you can really do quite a bit of work right in SharePoint Designer now without having to crack open Visual Studio. Stephen, is there any questions yet?
We've been covering the questions here written, okay. So right now we're doing fine. Go ahead and keep going.
Is there anything that you wanted to add to with regards to the activities and conditions before I jump into this project management solution?
Well, not really. Just that you did highlight the info path activity. That is one that we added well sometime in the last year. That was a specifically for in response to customer demand, and just emphasizing that point. I wanted to emphasize that. But
absolutely, that comes up on a very regular basis. Where I just developed a solution a few months back, where an HR department had their corporate policies in info path forms, and each employee, instead of having them physically sign ink on a piece of paper and then scan that piece of paper into a document library that gets moved into a record center, so those acknowledged policies could be retained for some retention period, they opted to use info path. Each employee had to go in and acknowledge that they've read and they accept that specific policy. We can then take that copy of that policy that's been accepted by that user, print it to a PDF file, and store that PDF in a records management solution. So that very, very comprehensive requirements and needs for that. So for our project management solution today, I kept it very simple intentionally because I wanted to show the power of the HarePoint workflow extensions instead of a lot of other things which you're probably already aware of in SharePoint Designer and what you can do there. Excuse me. So the idea and the concept behind this project management solution is there's going to be a new site, a project site for each project, and there's a top-level site in this site collection that's going to manage a portfolio of project sites below that. And a user will come in, they'll choose to create a new project site through a request. It's an info path form. It's a two-step process where the requester enters the information about the project, about the project. It then goes through an approval process. So there's a second page in the info path form. I'll show you that. It gets approved, and then the workflow, the SharePoint Designer workflow, using HarePoint Workflow extensions, will subsequently create the new project subsite using a custom site template. I wanted to demonstrate that also. It doesn't have to be out-of-the-box SharePoint sites that are created. You can create a custom site template. So I created a custom project site template, and then I go and set some security. And you can see how minimal the workflow is to accomplish all of that. So the options to implement this solution, and I've done it 100 times or more, without HarePoint workflow extensions, requires us to either crack open Visual Studio and write a .NET workflow or a .NET event receiver on your request list, or you could do it as a PowerShell script. I've actually done that for clients where they wanted a PowerShell script that gets run on a regular basis, and it checks a particular list for new entries, and when it finds a new entry, it goes off and does something. But all of those are what I consider highly customized code, and as I'm sure all of you know, the second you get into custom code, you have to write it, debug it, maintain it, deploy it, and constantly go through that life cycle with that code in a development environment. Those types of solutions can usually take up to a week to deploy. Again, the solution that I created here and deployed, it actually took me less than 2 hours to get it done, debugged, and running. That includes the template, the custom template and everything. So a significant amount of custom development effort by a factor of 20 at least can be saved by using these workflow extensions. So again, this project management solution, the process is we're going to submit a new request. The requester completes an info path form and submits it for approval. It gets approved. We're going to provision a site. We're going to use the workflow extensions to create a site from a custom template. We're going to set site permissions, and then we're going to update a portfolio list that says, here's a new project site, here's the project name, the project number, and a link to that project site. So I kept it, again, very simple. But let's walk through this. I want to show you the info path form first and how simple it is. This info path form has two views in it, one for the requester. This is the first view that's default. The requester comes in and fills out their name or on behalf of who they're making the request on, the date. It defaults to the current date. Give it a project number, a project name, a description, and an optional project manager. We're going to use a Joe manager for demonstration purposes. Once the form has been submitted for approval, it goes into an approval state, and I'll walk through this with you. So the request approval comes up. These fields are now read-only, and once it gets approved, the workflow will run again and go off and provision the site and do the security. So hopefully everybody understands the very, very simple info path form with two views. I'm going to close this down. If you have any questions about it, I'll be happy to bring it back up. This info path form is, this workflow is what's called a state machine. So I created the workflow. Let me go over here to our request list. This is where all the requests come in. This is the info path form. If I say new document, you're going to see the project request form up. Let me go back and I'll show you the structure of this list. It's very, very straightforward. I have the request date, the project number, the project name, the project description, the account ID of the person who made the initial request themselves, the account ID of the project manager that was specified for this project, and then I have this stage. And what I do with stages in these workflows is I have this workflow set to run every time the item is created, the new item is created, or it's modified. And it runs through these steps. So the stage that a particular request is in is it's either in edit by the requester, or submitted for approval, or it's in approval, meaning it's waiting for approval. It's approved for the site to be created, and it's completed. So between the workflow and the info path form, it walks through these five major steps. So the second thing, I'll get into the project portfolio here, which I have on the home page. The project portfolio list is nothing more than a title, the project number, project description, and a site URL. And this list is actually being dynamically created on the fly by the same workflow. Once the workflow provisions the project site, sets the permissions, then it adds the item to this portfolio. Now again, for simplicity purposes, I kept this very simple. When I built these out for clients, it's much more comprehensive where we can update the team members of a project site by going in and editing the portfolio, and the workflow runs and updates those permissions on the site. We can add and remove team members. We can decommission a project. A project site could then be moved to an archive location. That can all be done with these workflow extensions. I excluded all of those processes again because I didn't want this to be so complex that it became, the waters became muddied. It was difficult to follow. So all I have here is two lists: the request list, which is the info path form library, and this portfolio list, which is what's created by the workflow. These items are once the project site's created. Let me show you my project template site. I went in and created, this was based on the out-of-the-box SharePoint project site. I added a requirements document library and a design document library. This was just to demonstrate you can have as many of these packaged project sites. Most of my clients have 2 or 3 different types of projects that they're working with, and they want a little bit different template, potentially with some predefined tasks. So the tasks become somewhat consistent from project to project. I added some predefined tasks in here just, again, to show that this can be saved as a template. I saved it as project site template, in the template library, and I then used that template in my workflow when new sites are being provisioned to manage projects. Again, I did that because I wanted to demonstrate you can use your own custom defined project templates that you've applied information architecture to and potentially structured the content in that site around the way you manage projects, which could be different than the way the next client managed projects. So if there's no questions, I'm going to walk right into the process of creating a new request, and then I'll jump into the workflow and show you what's happening with each one of these stages. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go and say, we're going to request the creation of a new project. I'm going to be the requester of this project. So I'm connected to Active Directory on this server and have picked up my Active Directory ID. It defaulted today's date. I'm going to give this a project number of demo dash, I'm going to leave the dash out so you can see what I've done there. 1, 2, 3, demo project site. This is a demo project, just the description. And I've got an Active Directory user called Joe Manager. He's going to be the manager of this project site. And the reason I wanted to demonstrate this was so you could see that with their comprehensive security management, I can give Joe Manager contribute permissions on the new project site that's provisioned. So let me save and close this, and you'll see the state that this is in. Here's our new demo entry that I just created. It's currently in Edit by Requester. The workflow is now completed. Let me show you what the workflow does. When it's in Edit by Requester stage, I stop inheriting items on the current item. So this current item, I wanted to stop inheriting permissions. I wanted to delete all the current permissions that were on there. And then I grant the person who created the item contribute rights and the requester. They could be one and the same, but I grant both those individuals contribute rights. And the reason I do that, the next time Bob Mixon comes into the project site, I want to look at my requests. I only have permissions to see my project requests. If Jane Doe or Stephen came in and created a project request, he couldn't see my project requests. He could only see his project requests, because these lists can fill up very quickly. So this demonstrates this is a HarePoint workflow action that allows us to stop inheriting permissions. You can do the same type of thing out of the box. This is more comprehensive. This you can't do out of the box. This is a HarePoint extension. Delete all permissions on the current item, and then grant these permissions on that current item. So let's go and take a look. You'll see we look at shared with. Hopefully this doesn't take too long here. Go to advanced. And you can see, now I'm a site collection administrator, so I have full control. But it did give me contribute rights on that item. The person who created it, I'm logged in as the administrator. They have contribute rights on it. And then I went ahead and I wanted to also show you that we could update groups. So whoever the owners and members of the project management office itself, they also have contribute, and then the owner has full control of that item. That way they can go in and edit it and so on and so forth. So very comprehensive in 1, 2, 3 lines of actions. I was able to redefine, stop inheriting permissions, and set the permissions for specific users. The next step, since it's still in edit, maybe I didn't get it done and all, I'm now going to come in and I'm going to say, let's submit this for approval. It runs the same workflow again, and it goes to this stage. The item's been submitted for approval. You'll see that the workflow is in progress. It's completed now, and it's in the approval stage. Why I separate being submitted for approval and in the approval stage is this is where I would want to send an email out that says, hey, manager, Bob Mixon has requested a new project site. Do you approve it or not? And in that email would be information about that request and a link to the request form and all. I don't have an email server on this server or Exchange installed on this server, so I can't actually send an email because it would cause the workflow to stop because it can't find an email server to send to. I then change the stage after I've sent the email. I've informed the manager. It's your employees or your individual has requested the creation of a new project, and then I set the stage to in approval. This stage simply sits here and waits the in approval for the manager to actually approve the form. So now you're going to see we're in the request approval view. These fields are read-only. The manager has the rights to be able to change the project number or the name or update the description or change the project manager. For the purposes of our demonstration, I'm going to go ahead and approve it with this data, and then I'll show you what the workflow is going to do then. Now we get down to this approved for creation stage. The first thing I do is I want to pull the current project number and make sure there's no spaces in there. I intentionally left a space because I use that project number for the URL of the new project subsite. So the first thing I do is I get the project number that the user entered, and then I use the HarePoint string manipulation activity, the replace activity, and I say find a space in that project number and replace it with a dash and output the result back to the project number. So if you recall, the project number I had given was demo space 123. The site that's going to be created, the URL will be demo-123, and that's all that line does right there. Very powerful to have those capabilities now in SharePoint Designer. I then dynamically build my site URL. So I say in my project site, in my PMO, I'm going to use this project number variable as the URL for my new site. This is the one line right here to create a new subsite. I create the project with the project, or the subsite with the title using the project name. The site URL that I dynamically created above that using the project number is the URL. And here's my custom template. So this can be, STS #0 for a blank team site, or STS #1, or it can be a site template name. And so the workflow activity is smart enough to say, oh, that's a custom site template that Bob's created. We're going to use that to create a new instance of this project site. I then also pass in the site description, which was the project description that I put out there. And I say use unique permissions. For now, I said no, but you can create a new site, give it its own permissions. In some cases, you might want only the project team members to have access to the entire site. In this case, I didn't do that. And then the output was created that's set to true or false based on if there were issues with the creation of the site. So let's go and see, if we look at our site contents, you're going to see our demo project site was created. And if you look at the URL, it's demo-123. So I was able to remove those spaces in the workflow, so I didn't have those, %20s in my URLs. And as you can see, this was created from my project site template, which has these predefined tasks in it. The name of the site is Demo Project Site. It's got our requirements and design. Also, if you take a look at the description came over. This is a demo project. This came over from my workflow. That was all set, again, with this one line, this one activity from the HarePoint Workflow extensions. So the next thing you can do, which with HarePoint extensions that you can't do out of the box, is you can modify permissions on a different site. So I went and said, grant contribute permissions to the project manager. If you recall, I gave Joe manager. I said I wanted him to be the project manager. So what I'm telling the workflow to do right here is say, now go to that new project site and give Joe manager contribute access to it. So if we go over here to our site settings and we look at site permissions, here's Joe manager, and he's got contribute permissions. So the workflow is taking care of all of that for us. If I wanted to activate some specific features in here, I can go in and I can activate features with their site administration category of workflows. The next thing I do is I delete all permissions from the current request, so it can't be modified anymore. Because the site's been provisioned, I don't want that request, that particular request, to be modified. and I set the process stage to completed. And then the next thing I do is I create a new list item in another list, which happens to be, let's go back to our browse, let's go back up here. I also wanted to update this project portfolio. And you'll notice that this new project site, project number demo 123, has been added with a link to the project. So you can very quickly, now again, in real implementations, I would have whether the project site was active or not, or if it's an archived project. That can all be done through simple workflows. Again, I just kept it simple for today's demonstration purposes. But that's added right here, this list item. I create a new item in this list using the properties of the current request. So is there any questions so far as what I've done here and how simple it is to, again, this literally took me about 2 hours, and that includes creating the PMO site collection, creating my lists, adding all my columns, creating my info path form. Again, this wouldn't be a functioning project management office as it is today, but this is a very comprehensive start to the automation of site provisioning and managing permissions and managing a portfolio of sites, whether it's a project management office environment, or we've done the same thing with employee management and employee onboarding. Every employee gets a small team site that is where all of their employment documents and direct deposit stubs and everything are stored. So very, very comprehensive of what you can do here. Stephen, is there any other questions right now?
Right now, not really. I would like just to be clear, a couple people have kind of hit on the same topic. Just to be very clear about what we're looking at an install of SharePoint 2013, and we're looking at a workflow that is using the 2010 engine in it, okay? And we'll talk a little bit more about the upcoming product again, as I mentioned at the beginning, a bit later. But so indeed, for everyone who has asked that, this is a 2013 install, and we're using a 2010 workflow.
Yes, that's correct. This is a single server development environment. It happens to be one of my development environments. You can see by the URL. It's an Active Directory domain controller with the corp domain. Mm-hmm. I am running
Here
SharePoint
is another question, if I can.
Sure.
Would the provisioning work with published sites, with the publishing feature activated?
Absolutely. So you have two options there. You can create your own publishing site and implement that, or you can just use the out-of-the-box publishing site, and then you use the workflow extensions to activate different features or deactivate different features. So I've done it both ways, where I have a team site and I create a template of a team site, because you can't create a template of a project, or I'm sorry, of a publishing site with the publishing feature activated. So you create the team site with the structure that you want, save it as a template, and you can create instances of that team site and then activate the publishing feature. So there are administrative actions in these extensions that allow you to activate and deactivate features. I haven't found any limits with regards to what sites I can provision, including my own site templates, including my own custom sites. Hopefully that answered that question.
Yeah. Yes, that's great.
Stephen?
Yes. Yeah. That's all the questions we got so far. Go ahead and.
Well, that was the end of my demo with regards to the actual HarePoint product. If there was any other activities that individuals would like to take a look at, or categories of activities. Mm-hmm. Here's the activate feature that I was just describing. So you can even create a new site collection and activate the site collection features, and then activate the site features as necessary, all through workflow.
Okay, so let's go ahead and open up the floor. If anybody has any other questions, please go
Yeah,
ahead.
I'm more than happy to.
Did you mention at the beginning that this is a state machine workflow? No, this is not a state. Go ahead, Bob.
It's the approach that I use when developing workflows as state machines. So this workflow gets executed every time the item is added or updated, and I have the state where I manage the state as a metadata column in that list, and it walks through the different stages. It's a great way to have info path forms and a form library interact with each other instead of trying to use wait states and all with SharePoint workflows. I find they're still somewhat buggy. This is a tried and true approach that I use to develop workflows. I've been doing it for years. Works very, very well. So each one of these basically handles a different state each time the workflow is executed. So Stephen's right. This is not a state workflow. It is a linear workflow that manages and handles different states that that item is currently in. And that stage can be changed from either the info path form when a user clicks a button, or it can be updated from a workflow based on what you're currently wanting it to do. It also makes it very easy to read. If anyone would like to further discuss later this concept of using this process for creating workflow, it's actually a concept. I'm more than happy to do so. I use it fairly extensively. Any other questions?
All right. Well, if anyone is trying to, typing out a question right now, go ahead and click the raised hand option in your webinar panel so that we know to wait for you. So once again, I'd like to mention that HarePoint will be coming out with a product that supports SharePoint Online. That will be available in beta this summer, and that will first come out specifically supporting SharePoint Online, and then we will come out with a version that supports the SharePoint 13 on-premise workflow manager. And I hope to have several webinars like this one where we are able to demonstrate the functionality that product gives.
Absolutely, which is a good point, Stephen, if I can interject here. If you have any business process or specific solution needs that you might feel would be a good webinar for us to deliver, I'm more than happy to put a proof of concept together in my local servers, and we can do another webinar for your attendees to demonstrate how those types of solutions can be implemented. I've done hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of these, and there's probably not too many of them I haven't implemented, so I'm more than happy to share that experience.
Here's another question come in. Would you explain the impersonation step? The contents of this step will run as the workflow author. I never saw that before.
The concept is when you compile, an impersonation step allows you to execute the statements within this block as the individual who published the workflow. So I'm logged in as the farm or the administrator account. So my permissions, the workflow permissions inside this block are elevated to use the farm account when it's executing these steps. If I were just Joe user and I was creating a workflow and I'm logged in as Joe user, that workflow would execute with Joe user's credentials. So the way to get around permission issues and have elevated permissions in SharePoint 2010 workflows is to use the impersonation step. And these can be, a regular step does not allow you to elevate permissions. Only the impersonation step does. So again, any actions or conditions that are executed inside an impersonation block are elevated permissions based on the individual login that published this workflow. Very powerful. We have to do that quite often in .NET programming. Elevate our permissions so we can do something, and then drop our permissions back down. It's all capable in here. There's also workflow activities in the HarePoint to do that.
Okay, well, let's go ahead and wrap it up. Thank you all for attending.